Hey, this week we've got a bonus episode for you, a conversation with the entrepreneur and now author, John Lee Dumas. His new book, The Common Path to Uncommon Success, is a great primer for anyone thinking about striking out on their own. I've been listening to JLD's podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, for a few years now, and I've even taken his course on how to build a podcast and a loyal audience. John was the one who really opened my eyes about how a creative type might begin to make it on his, her, or their own. And so, after I got laid off from ESPN, it was John's insight, among others, that led me to believe I could set my own course in life. His book, The Common Path to Uncommon Success, teaches you how you might walk your own path. It was such a pleasure to have John on the podcast, and I think you're just going to get a ton out of it. If you like this episode, rate and review it, and find me through my newsletter at paulkicksnewsletter.com. Now, though, without further ado, here's my conversation with John Lee Dumas.
What up, Paul?
JLD, I'm telling you right now, man, this thing has been like 5 years in the making, dude. Like I took entrepreneur. I took the podcasting paradise like a long time ago. Changed the way that I looked at my career. And that's actually how I want to try to focus this interview.
Love it.
So reading the book, it's sort of, for me, it reaffirmed what creative types like myself need in this sort of environment, which is an enterprising attitude. And you take us sort of step by step how to create a business for yourself so that you can, like for me, like I want to always be able to do the sort of writing that I want, but I cannot just anymore just rely on any one publisher. I cannot rely on any one magazine. I can't rely on any one website. I can't rely on any one broadcasting partner, right? Like you have to begin to be more enterprising about that. And I'm curious from your vantage point, how do you view things fit in with like how it might fit for a creative type like myself, or how it might fit for sort of creative audience and what you're teaching?
Get excited. Like get really excited, because we no longer live in a world where scraggly old white guys make all the decisions. We don't. Right now, the public makes the decisions about whether they love X or Y or Z or hate X or Y or Z. Like it's a blessing and it's a curse. I mean, it's definitely a blessing that it's not just old scraggly white dudes that are the gatekeepers on everything anymore. Like that's amazing. Now, where the curse comes in is like, wow, you're given a lot of rope. You may just find a way to hang yourself with that rope, which can be a scary proposition as well. So what I like to say is you have an opportunity to truly become the best solution to one real problem in this world. If you can become the best solution to one real problem, A, you're going to win. But B, you're going to be able to use that as a wedge into the world that you can then expand over the years to come into any of the different areas you may want to go. Maybe you never want to expand. Maybe you're just going to say, I'm going to be the best at this for the rest of my life. And that is going to be what makes me happy. That's my zone of fire. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. Or maybe like me, you'll use your niche of Entrepreneurs on Fire, or my daily show to interview entrepreneurs, to wedge into the world and then expand out into a media empire, hosting Podcasters Paradise, the biggest podcasting community in the world, creating courses like Webinar on Fire, journals like Mastery Journal, Freedom Journal, Podcast Journal, all the way to now writing my first traditionally published book, The Common Path to Uncommon Success. So I use it as a wedge, and you can too. But it starts with you being the single best solution to one real problem.
Yeah, you got to find a way to sort of solve that problem. And that's what I love about the book, because it's taking you through sort of step by step of how you can do this. Each chapter takes you a little bit deeper into how you can become the entrepreneur that you need to be, and then also along the way how you can sort of solve problems that are occurring for other people, right? Because this is one of the things you stress in the book, you always want to be able to solve that next problem for your audience, for your client, whatever the case may be. For those who aren't familiar with your journey, if you could just take like 2 or 3 minutes and describe for us where you were about 10 years ago and how you began to make that switch to what you are today.
Let's go back 20 years. 20 years ago, I graduated college and I became an officer in the U.S. Army. After my 4 years of active duty service, which included a 13-month tour of duty in Iraq as a tank commander in charge of 4 tanks and 16 men, I set off on what I thought was going to be an amazing life. I was 26 years old, ready to take on the world. And I immediately went into 6 years of struggle where I wasn't finding any success. I wasn't finding any happiness. I was depressed. I was dealing with PTSD from my time in the military. Life was tough. 6 years, by the way. This wasn't 6 months. This was 6 years. And then I got to 32 years old. So we're already now at your 10-year ago time frame. I thought to myself, enough is enough. Like, enough is enough. It's time to get out of this funk that I'm in. And so I started reading the right books, listening to the right audiobooks, listening to podcasts, which eventually led me to say, you know what's missing in this world? That I can become the best solution to a real problem. You know what a real problem in this world is? And I truly believe this. And I was right. I truly believe there was a real problem in this world on the fact that there was no daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. Does that sound fairly simple? Yeah, but it can honestly be that simple. I felt like a problem in the world existed, that the fact there was no daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. And I wanted there to be a podcast that was released 7 days a week interviewing entrepreneurs. It didn't exist. So I stepped into that void. I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire. And here we are, a decade later. I've published over 3,000 episodes. I have over 100 million listens of the show, over 1.4 million monthly listens. I've generated over $100,000 in net profit in my business every month for 91 months in a row now. And I've launched some of those amazing courses, communities, and books and journals that I've mentioned earlier. And here I am today.
Yeah. And it's so for the listeners of the podcast, first off, John Lee Dumas is the reason that Now That's a Great Story exists, because I got introduced to his podcast. I got introduced to Podcast Paradise. And from there, I was like, okay, I'm going to create this for myself. And along the way, John, you were the one that really helped me understand, like, okay, how can I begin to make a life for myself? And, for listeners of this podcast, they know that, I'm no longer at ESPN. I'm now like fully on my own author, like my own entrepreneur, all of that. JLD is a huge reason for that. A huge reason for that. So I'm so happy that you were able to join us today. What would you say for those, because the podcasting, let's focus for just a second more on podcasting, and then I want to go back to the book. Podcasting is a lot different than it was 10 years ago, right? When you were starting out, there's something like 600,000 podcasts now, right? You talk about this a little bit in your book, but for the audience, how would you say, if you're trying to start out on a podcast now, how would you try to establish that niche and establish your foothold in such a crowded marketplace?
I wish I had some complicated theory, some secret hidden path for you to become a successful podcast host. But I have one simple phrase that is true for podcasting, and that is true for business, and that is true for life. If you can identify a real problem and become the best solution to that problem with your podcast, that podcast will win. And again, that sentence works for all business, for all life. If you can find a micro niche that is a problem that has no solution or has really poor solutions, you can frankly just come in and almost immediately become the best solution, you will win. Like, people want it to be more complicated because then they have an excuse as to why they're not doing it. You're not doing it because you're lazy or you don't have the knowledge or for any number of mental and mindset reasons that you have. I get it. I've been there too. I had 6 years of being unhappy, depressed, broke, all those things. But guess what? Now that I can see the light, it's kind of frustrating when I see people struggle so much seeing that same light because it's so bright and it's so clear. But people, they want excuses as to why not to do something. And I want to take those excuses away.
Yeah. And so the book deals with this quite a bit, and this is what I love about the book. You start out with sort of identifying who your avatar would be, and you have to get like super focused on what sort of audience it is you're going to serve, right? Because so many people like me, they'll think, when I was starting out in this, John, I was just like, oh, there's the web is infinite, but the web is not like that. The web is very, very tribal. And the more that you can find that niche, and to your point, that audience that you can serve, that problem that you can solve, you're going to win. I'm wondering, at what point did you begin to realize that for yourself? Was it after you'd launched the podcast? Or did you even have a sense for that before it? And did that go into some of the framework for why you launched the podcast and all other subsequent businesses?
I had a sense of that before because I realized how I was acting. I was being drawn towards that tribal, fanatical kind of like, I want to be following these individuals because I am so aligned with everything that they're saying. Like, that is my tribe. That is my leader. That is a person I want to learn from. And to your point, I want to kind of take a step back here and talk about Seth Godin, one of the people that endorsed my book. He read the book because I sent it to him and asked him to, and he read it and he said, John, this is a fantastic book. I would love to endorse this book, but let's jump on a call because I want to talk to you about something. And we had a private 45-minute call. I was very honored because he's a legend. He's written New York Times bestselling books. He is great at what he does. He said, John, this is your first book, and this is a great first book. I think it's going to do really well. I want to endorse it. Here are the kind words I'm going to be saying about it. Please use these words because I believe it. But I want to just tell you that your second book is in your third book, and your fifth book, and your 10th book, they will all be different than your first book. Because your first book took you 10 years to write. It took me 10 years to interview 3,000 of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. Thousands of hours of conversations that I distilled down into 17 core foundational principles that people can follow. This revolutionary 17-step roadmap to their financial freedom and fulfillment. This is the book I had to write, and now I've written it. He said, every book from this point forward has to be controversial. Like, it has to be polarizing. People either have to love it or hate it. He's like, that's how books 2 through infinity are going to win. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know if I'll ever write another book. If I do,
was it hard, or what was it? Yeah.
It was excruciating. It was 480 hours of ripping thousands of hours of conversations out of my little pea-sized brain and putting it into a book. It was excruciating.
Welcome to my life, John.
The next book that I write, if I write one, will be polarizing, will be controversial, because that's what people want.
Yeah. So the 17 steps, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the thing that I love about this book is also the thing that I loved about your course when I took it. And it takes you really from like, okay, are you a complete novice to this? Okay, here's the first step you should take, the second, the third, the fourth. And the thing that I love about it as well is, as you are building your audience and as you are building your business, you're also adapting to what the customer has to say and what you want from that customer. There are parts where you start talking about, and this is going to get sort of like technical, but like later in the book, when you're talking about the funnels and, the sort of businesses that you can sort of create off of those funnels, and how you're thinking about it blew my mind, because I was like, where I am right now, I'm like, oh yes, of course I can do that. Of course I can do that. For those who are sort of in storytelling or in creative pursuits, who are thinking only about that, what sort of flexibility do they need in terms of their mental flexibility to sort of be into to encapsulate this sort of thinking where you're adapting to this all the time, right? Like, is this something, this is maybe the same sort of question. Are you learning this as well, only as you're doing your business, or does this maybe go back to the Army where you came up with a sense of like, you have to be really adaptable to the situation?
What I learned that is a success in business, and specifically entrepreneurship, is to do the following: create free, valuable, and consistent content. I did that with my podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire. It was free. It was valuable, not because of me. I wasn't good, but my guests were. And it was valuable because of the knowledge that they shared. Free, consistent, and valuable. Key. When you do that, you will build an audience who will grow to know, like, and trust you because you're giving them free, valuable, and consistent content in their life. And then you ask them a very simple question. What is your biggest struggle right now? What is your biggest struggle right now? And guess what? They will tell you their pain points, their obstacles, their challenges, because people love telling you their pain points, their obstacles, their challenges. And then you can decide which ones you want to create the solution for. And that will guide you every step of the way. So people are just like, well, I can't start right now because like I know the first step, but I don't know the next 15 steps. Yeah. The Martin Luther King quote that I love so much is, you don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step. You take the first step, the clouds part. You take the second step, you ask the question, what's your biggest struggle right now? Your audience tells you the guidance of the third step and the fourth step and so on and so forth. Every one of my multi-million-dollar ideas I've had since 2012 has not come from me. It's come from my audience following that very simple formula.
And one last question for you. This is independent of market, right? You can do this in your space. You can do this in something that's like mine, which is geared much more toward like literary books and whatnot. You can find people's pain points, right? And you can identify that. And it's just a matter of listening to your audience. Is that right?
This 17-step roadmap can be applied to any human being that wants to achieve financial freedom and fulfillment in any vertical, in any niche, in any industry. They are tried and true tests of time. Like, this is truly the modern day Think and Grow Rich. That's why I wrote this book, was to make it evergreen, just like Think and Grow Rich is. This will be able to be read by my great-great-great-grandson, and he can literally use the structure in this book to create his version of financial freedom and fulfillment. There's no Instagram hacks or TikTok strategies. These are timeless principles that will forever be true until AI kills the world.
The common path to uncommon success. This again, I owe so much to you, John. This podcast, a lot of just my mindset right now, it comes from the things that you've been saying for the past few years. I'm so glad that this book is out there now. Please buy it. Available wherever you want to buy books. All right, John, thank you for joining us.
Adios.
Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for listening. If you like this season of Now That's a Great Story, or just getting caught up on the first, the best way to keep in touch is through the newsletter, paulkicksnewsletter.com. There, you'll get even more advice on how to be the best writer and storyteller you can be. In fact, right now, I've got a free PDF for you. The 7 rules top long-form writers follow to make more money from their stories. Sign up for the newsletter and you'll get the free PDF. Head there now, paulkicksnewsletter.com.